Thanks a lot, dear. Right. First off, I'm not the best friend of PowerPoint either. But it usually gives you sort of the red line of what you want to speak about. There might be some slides, I'll just super fast forward along with them because they already covered the topic. Yeah, glad to be here today. Had a few interesting discussions yesterday in the evening with customers that already are using us together with Corero. And it's a pleasure to be here today. As you just said, right, we just renegotiated a new contract. Great partnership, great relationship. It gives us more of your product, more of your solution. Basically helping customers better protect. So who am I? I'm Michael Wodosiek. I run the cybersecurity business of Juniper for anything outside of the US, worldwide. Have a team of people across the world. I also have an active role. I said, nice to be the manager of the rest of the world, but I still want to see customers, partners, technology partners, actually have a day job. I've been with Juniper for 3 years now, not too long. When I look into the organization, there's many people with 15, 16 year service period, very low inventory numbers. Before joining Juniper, I actually spent 2 years with an Israeli company. So the comment that you just had about Incapsula and Imperva, I was actually working for the founders of those two companies, Shlomo Kramer and Gur Schatz. Incapsula finally made it into the product, Cato Networks, which is in the SASE space, basically combining networking and security, especially for edge networking. Most of the time I spent with VMware in the industry, building out data centers, building out cloud infrastructure, moving from a more technical role into the dark side, into the sales role. I always kept being aligned with my technical background, but actually started off in the industry, building out carrier networks. First with 3Com, trying to bash Cisco in the very early times, yeah, until they... Cheers. Thank you. Until they overnight just dropped their enterprise business and their service provider business. And also spent a few years with Newbridge Networks. And this is really where part of my heartbeat comes from. Anything we do, whether it's about networking, it's about security, we just heard, yeah, integration is key, having the APIs. I live for automation, yeah. I don't want to be kept up at night, keeping the lights on. There's other ways to do that. That's one of the things we're proud of doing with Juniper, yeah. We try to build in a lot of security into our infrastructure instead of going the bolted on way, yeah. And I've seen enough solutions in my years where you just bolted on another capability to what you already have. Well, the bolting on brings yet another graphical interface, yet another CLI, yet another API you need to integrate with. Well, that's not the fun piece, right? So we have the commitment of trying to build in as much as we can do. And what we're doing with Corero on the DDoS side is at the very heart of that. Put together a little bit of an agenda. So what are we doing together with Corero, tightly integrating DDoS defense into the infrastructure for service providers, but as well for enterprises, looking at the evolving threats. That's just an extension to what we heard. It's our observation of where do the advisories come in to your infrastructure today? Yeah. What are we seeing? An approach to embedded protection at the core of the network, but also at the edge. Make leverage of your existing investments. Yeah. Key item there. And investment is not just the router that you buy, the routing switch that you buy. It's how do you operate those things. Yeah. And I brought some real world examples I want to speak about some, and then Q&A. If you have questions in between, the group is not too big. I think we can also do that. So over the past 3.5 years, we've driven the shift going away from what we had as network security, which was the traditional bolting on capabilities around the network, towards secure networking. A lot of that is driven by what we call the AI native networking. Tools that we're hosting from the cloud, the Mist platform, that has massive capabilities in terms of machine learning, a natural language interface, moving towards AI ops. That all started off with wired and wireless, campus and branch networking. We're driving that into the entire portfolio in the meantime, including the routing, the data center switching, but also the security. So extending the model to understand more. Yeah? There's no limit to the model. Yeah? You just put more compute against that. Yeah? So moving from outside in security to inside out. What does that mean? Now basically, we have a team, the Juniper Threat Labs, that are beefing up our sec intel. Yeah? So we're doing a lot of threat analysis, beefing up our security intelligence, work together through the Cyber Threat Alliance with other sec intel providers. That gives us a lot of knowledge about current attacks, 0 days, whatever's currently being used to get into your infrastructures. We're building that into all the components, not just the firewalls. We're building that into the routers, we're building that into the data center switches. So those components can actually subscribe from our sec intel. So if on an edge router, a core router, we see that there's a communication going on towards a command and control service, it blocks it at the router. It doesn't have to go for the firewall to detect that. We're building that into the wired and wireless infrastructure at the campus. Yeah? So even at the access point, it's going to block those kind of communications. So it reduces the attack surface vastly. What does that mean towards what we're doing with Corero? Well, basically on the MX and the PTX platform that we have, that's the main edge and core routers. We use them as the sampling device. So instead of having to put out an appliance to do all the data collection, these routers can do that. And they will sample traffic, send it to the detection engine. I'll get into that a little later. And then, work against the DDoS attack. Yeah? We'll look into that a little later. Now, the cool thing about that is it protects the investments you already have. Yeah? You already have the sampling device standing in your infrastructure. Yeah? No need to put out additional infrastructure for that. No need to operate additional infrastructure. It's already there. Let's look into the current development of the adversaries. Looking at the sectors that are most targeted, we see a lot of education, research facilities being attacked, governmental organizations being attacked. And then we see on the more red side, transportation, defense, healthcare, and so on. Advanced persistent threats are evolving. We see the nation-state actors on a daily basis. And it's not just Iran and Russia. And I'm not a friend of keeping things back, yeah? Even if my press group says you shouldn't say those things. China, of course, they're dangerous. We've done a study with the education and research sector in Germany. Their biggest threat is the US. Coming into Germany trying to steal patents or information before patents. Okay, wow. The emergence of zero-day exploits, the attackers get smarter and smarter. They start to use AI to build phishing attacks, to get malware built, polymorphic malware built. And they're setting themselves up for a business, yeah? Ransomware as a service, DDoS as a service. You go out there, you buy whatever kind of attack you want to have against your competition, against someone you don't like, yeah? You just buy it. And I was puzzled. That's not even expensive. You can go out and buy a ransomware as a service attack for less than $100. And it's going to go out to organizations and potentially encrypt up to 100 stations. $1 per station encrypted. Hey, that's cheap. if you want to harm someone. Whereas, especially in the gray area that you see there, we don't really see the ransomware attacks there. We see much more of data exfiltration. And I think that's the more dangerous thing, or the more harmful thing. I mean, encrypting a system, well, with a little bit of luck, you'll have a backup. You can get it back from a backup. Yeah. Once the information is stolen, it's gone. Someone else is going to make use of that. Yeah. We had a case in Switzerland, where I come from, well, where I live at the moment, with one of the big pharmaceuticals. Pre-clinic studies were stolen, yeah, made use, brought out to the market as proven medicine. Yeah. Well, the kudos are not going to that research of the pharmaceutical. Bringing that back into DDoS. I very much like to compare DDoS to teamwork. Yeah. Teamwork, there is no I. It's we act as a team. And DDoS is nothing that Corero itself, Juniper, Fortinet, yourself as MSPs, MSSPs can solve. It's a team play. Yeah? We have to play together. And that's one of the reasons why I really find it inspiring to be here today, yeah, or these days. This group of people looks like a team. Yeah? We want to help each other, because that's the only way how we're going to be successful in fighting against the DDoS attacks that are out there. Just a few numbers. I took them from the data breach investigation report from Verizon. I very often refer back to that. It's comprehensive. It's, I don't know, 160 pages, 170 pages of data that you can make use of. So what are the top victims with denial of service incidents? Yeah? 35% in the finance area, 28% in manufacturing. Not too much on the information technology side. Yeah? Just a few statements. Akamai, we have you here, right? Successfully reported last year in August, mitigating one of the largest DDoS attacks, blocking more than 419 terabyte of traffic. Wow, yeah. I'll get into more numbers there. Europol, they actually stopped the operation power off. 27 denial of service for hire platforms stopped. They actually arrested people. Yeah? I'm not sure about the US, whether you have laws where for cyber incidents you can actually go to jail. In Europe, we do have them. Yeah? So we have CIOs in the meantime. If they don't come up to the level of security reporting and do their job right, they can actually go to jail for that. Yeah? I think something like that happened to the CISO or CIO of Uber 2 years ago. Yeah, I mean, that was just a statement. Yeah, in Europe, we see that happening more and more and more. And that's right, yeah, because it is a crime. Yeah, therefore it's called cybercrime. I stole that slide from Corero, and I'm not going to go into the detail. Basically, DDoS is growing and growing and growing. Last year, we saw one of the cloud-based DDoS providers blocking a few of the 4 terabits per second plus attacks. I'm curious what's going to come in 2025. When are we going to hit the 10 terabit? Yeah. What we are seeing is that more than 60% of DDoS attacks have a component around DNS in that. And looking at the building in security instead of bolting it on, part of our security strategy is, on the one side, we do the DDoS protection together with Corero. We also have our firewalls. We do the layer 3, layer 4 stuff. We do the layer 7 stuff. We do DNS security. A lot of the things that possibly are going to come through the DDoS attack, we can still capture at other layers. Yeah? And we try to embed that all under the same management. Yeah. 22% of the attacks are going to repeat within 24 hours. That number. How long does it take with any of the solutions in the market that do DDoS to actually identify, detect, and remediate a DDoS attack? Most solutions take more than 10 to 15 minutes. I really like the integration that we have with Corero. We are sub 10 seconds of detecting and mitigating or filtering the attack. So we don't care. The shorter the liveliness of such an attack is, we don't care. We will block it. Yeah. Let me go into a little bit of detail of how we do that, how we embed DDoS protection within our core routing and switching platforms. So, as I just said, we just renewed the contract that we already had for a number of years with Corero that was limited to only do the DDoS protection together with our MX platform. The product was called TDD, Threat Defense Director. Basically sampling traffic, sending it to the detection engine. The detection engine tells you that's a DDoS attack, and then writing filters into the router, whether it's the MX or the PTX. Well, I mean, if I just look into my last year, every second request I had was, well, we have your routers, but we also have a bunch of Cisco gear out there. Yeah, can you also support that? Well, Corero does, we don't. What about doing things in the cloud? Yeah, well, yeah, you need to speak to Corero. In the meantime, we actually have access to the entire portfolio, yeah? Where the remote mitigation that we're doing on the MX and the PTX series is still something that is very close to us. So that's where also we do part of the development of that. So it basically expands the capabilities that we can provide to you as a customer out of one house, yeah, instead of having to talk to two partners. And I think speaking about partnership and relationship, that's important because at the end of the day, it's again, a single point of contact providing you the support along with the entire infrastructure. So where we had this in the past, remote mitigation, we now can do all the detection through inline appliances. Yeah, there we go, sub-second. Yeah, data path appliances. Yeah, where we protect the full or percentage of the edge bandwidth. Again, sub-second protection. Redirect to the appliances is very similar to what we do with the remote mitigation. Yeah, so basically redirect the traffic to an appliance, do the analysis, and then take action and execution. That is probably the area that we were missing most. Yeah, because as I said, not every customer had MXs and PTXs everywhere in their infrastructure. They had some Cisco gear, they had some NetFlow probes, S-Flow probes, blah, blah, blah. We just couldn't deal with that. And it's a natural extension that is necessary. Yeah. The cool thing is, with us, you don't really have to change the routing. You set up your BGP, you set up everything up to the blackholing, it just works. Operationally, that's a major benefit. Yeah. Because ultimately you get most of the setup done initially on your routing infrastructure at the edge, also in the core for cloud providers, cloud data centers, and the little bit of configuration that is needed for the filtering that happens between the management part of Corero and the routers. So, I mean, that's a little bit of detail about the solution. So basically all our MXs and PTXs, they have a running configuration. And then there's a temporary configuration sort of at the front that is never going to make it into a commit state. Yeah. Now, most of you know, once you do a commit, it actually brings down part of the forwarding engine. It's cumbersome. You don't want to do that too often. Yeah. Now, with the ephemeral database that we have at the front, we can do what we call flex filters. So basically, when there is a DDoS attack identified and detected, Corero comes back and writes into that thermal database. It sets the filters, and for the time the DDoS attack is going on, it's going to filter the traffic, announce back to the ISP, I don't want to see those prefixes, I don't want to see that traffic, black hole that, so the line doesn't get completely filled. And once we see that the DDoS attack is flowing off, we just remove those filters again. That works sub 10 seconds. Doesn't require to do a commit on the platform. It basically keeps the infrastructure up and running. Yeah, I basically went into that. So we are reusing the customer's edge routing infrastructure, yeah, that they already have in place. Doesn't require any additional appliances. Yeah. We are using sampling. So yeah, well, we might have a 1 to 100 sampling, 1 to 1,000 sampling, 1 to 10,000 sampling. But that also means how much infrastructure do you need for the detection engine. Yeah? So you can balance the cost with that. We've seen that a 1 to 1,000 sampling actually works very, very well. That's what we usually deploy. That actually makes it that we can scale.
Michael, if I could just one moment on this. This for me is one of the main reasons why I joined Corero, because this to me is the most inspirational product in the marketplace. Because in my vernacular, you have the ability to get DDoS on your infrastructure just via software, right? You don't need to buy any hardware whatsoever. Our plan, our hope, is that we can actually extend this capability like the Juniper relationship to every single thing in the network. And we're doing that today, you'll see. So said another way, we're the only vendor in the marketplace that can turn your network. And this was through the inspiration and the work that we've done with Juniper. We can do this with other routers, but not to the same unique capability that we have with Juniper for two reasons. We have an engineering relationship, but the second is, frankly, my opinion, Juniper makes the best routers in the world, and you can realistically use the Juniper MX and PTX as effectively as any DDoS scrubbing device that you can have out there in the marketplace, right? So said another way, you don't need to do anything to your networks if you're willing to use the routers and the router infrastructure for blocking, and the better the routers, the better you have the capability to do that. And that's our future. Our future is to make the network do the detection and to make the network do the mitigation at all levels. We think that that's the future of DDoS, but we do it most notably with Juniper and most proudly with Juniper. I just wanted to say that this really is a very unique thing in the marketplace. And I think it works beautifully. I know a lot of you are already using this capability, but if you're not, this is something to take a look at.
Thank you. Right. Yeah, so this is basically the workflow. Where do I have my router? Oh, yeah, up here. Right. So basically, you're getting all the good and the bad traffic from the internet. It samples the traffic, feeds it into the NTD. So the detection engine does its magic. Yeah, figures out what's the good traffic, what's the bad traffic. It uses those events and the flow data, defines the policy. Yeah, so what kind of filters need to be written. Then basically the CMS goes up back to the router and it writes that configuration into the flex filters, and they get active instantly. Yeah, so it doesn't take any time to commit, doesn't take time to take over that configuration, it just gets active. And ultimately out of the router you get unaffected traffic, yeah? Clean internet. And basically these routers can be anywhere. Yeah? So I would say probably 50 to 60% of our customers are service providers / cloud providers. We see more and more cloud providers, MSPs, data center hosters come back to us asking for that. Yeah? Very often, they don't really have a very complex routing environment. Yeah? Not at the edge, not like a service provider. But it's a very effective way of handling DDoS attacks for a cloud provider. Over the past year, in 2024, the most discussions that I had were with research and education customers. They have a big fear, and the reason for that is, again, one of the references I have with me is the Japanese education network, or education and research network. They don't peer with the traditional ISPs. They typically peer with something like a national research network. Yeah? We have in Germany, it's called the Deutsche Forschungsnetz, DFN, which connects all the schools, all the universities, all the research entities like Max Planck Institute, Fraunhofer. They're all connected there. Yeah? But these guys, the one thing they do really well is networking. They have a 30-year background with Cisco. They've actually written part of BGP. I remember I was part of one of those development streams, writing part of BGP 30 years ago. That was fun, yeah. But they never really evolved into, well, there's a little bit more than just networking, yeah. So they provide you internet, they don't provide you clean internet, yeah. So in Germany, sort of a number of projects I have are with educational and research facilities, speaking about that, yeah, saying, so they are not going to protect you, so you need to protect yourself, yeah, and you just sort of write back what kind of traffic you don't want to have, yeah, that's standard BGP, you can do that. And healthcare. Healthcare is across Europe, and the few occasions that I had in Asia, an area where DDoS is being used to weaken your infrastructure and then break in and do the ransomware attack. I was on the forensics team. Yeah, that works, cool. On the forensics team with a customer in Austria, a dairy production plant. Very similar as healthcare. Yeah, I mean, nobody's going to die on a cyber attack, but something very interesting happens, right? Cows give milk. Yeah, so the milk comes in. And these guys were encrypted overnight. Cool. The end effect was they were out of business for 3.5 weeks. Now the cows don't stop to give milk for 3.5 weeks. Yeah, that's a fun fact. So they had to basically redirect the milk to be sort of brought into milk containers and whatever somewhere else. And during the forensics, it turned out that there were two events. The first was a DDoS event that basically kept their security team awake for 2 days, figuring out why are all the systems slowing down. It wasn't really volumetric. It was just big enough to get the performance down of part of the infrastructure, of the server infrastructure. Now, while the security team was chasing the DDoS attack, they started a process of malware that was already installed in there and made that active. Yeah? So basically, the lateral movement already happened, and they started to act. And they basically encrypted their entire server infrastructure. They were lucky. The infrastructure wasn't so big. It was 120 servers or so, and they actually had quite reliable backups. That was 2.5 years ago. So tricks like getting the right bit sets on the backups haven't happened at that time. So they could actually restore from existing backups. But ultimately, where that attack and that impact started off with was a DDoS attack. Yeah? And that's one of the things why I'm saying, not just fighting against DDoS, but fighting against security, it's a team play. Yeah. So I'm not going.
Sorry, Michael, if you go back to the previous slide. So when you're implementing a rule, what flexibility is the rule coming into the Juniper engine to actually black hole? So what I mean by that is, let's say somebody's DDoSing port 22, an SSH port, but that same client, which is potentially part of Mirai botnet, is actually doing an active SSH session. Are we going to basically kill both birds with one stone?
Yes.
Okay. So we're basically blocking the port, and that's it.
So there is a disadvantage of doing it that way. There might be legitimate traffic that's using the same pattern that will also block. Now you can choose, do you want to be a victim of a big volumetric DDoS attack, or do you want to have the one or the other occasion where you also block legitimate traffic?
I would use the analogy, is it better for most of the people to have some service
Exactly.
or all of them to have none?
Yeah,
It's service availability.
yeah,
Yeah.
correct.
And are you doing BGP black hole, or are you
Yes.
using more FlowSpecs?
Well, we're using both.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're using FlowSpec to create the filters, basically block with on the router, but we can also use a black hole to basically say, hey, ISP, those prefixes, yeah, I've identified these prefixes as sending the bad traffic. I don't want to see that traffic.
Okay, so your results are going to be in your BGP routing table and your FlowSpecs.
Okay, correct. Yeah.
At what point do you switch from one to the other?
Well, it happens to get, well, you take the decision whether you want to do the black holing or not. You can, you don't have to. Yeah. If you want to do it, at the same time, FlowSpec writes the filters into the MX, it's going to write back the black hole to your ISP.
It's policy based, so you'll probably be able to hear more about that in a technical presentation that's coming up. It's a tiered, progressive.
Is the final decision a black hole always a human's decision?
It's based on the policy. You can set up quite a lot to automate that process. Yeah. The human decision that you take is, do you want to do it or not?
And that's the final factor is somebody has to actually.
Well,
push.
you don't have to take action. If the policy says write a black hole or write back into the ISP, it is going to do that. Yeah. There's no manual interaction for that.
That's like the nuclear option is the black
Yeah,
hole. You never want to do that if you can avoid it.
It's why, automatic mitigation in the early days was never a good thing, because they always wanted, the service provider always wanted the option of a red button.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Malcolm.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yes, all of the for all the remote mitigation stuff, we support two modes. One is the CMS decide what needs to be done and just goes ahead and does it, and it becomes active immediately without any manual interaction. Or the second mode is it stages it, it's ready, and the operator's just got to go in and click, activate.
Yeah.
And that can change depending on whether it's the action, whether it's RTBH versus a block on the MX. Could be by customer. You've got your kind of flexibility to kind of configure it as it makes sense for your policies.
I was going to add as well that we go out of our way to try and make the blocks as accurate as they can be and as they can be expressed on the routers. So, the MX has been the most powerful because it has features like flexible pattern match inside the payload of the packet. Some of the other routers are less capable there. And Juniper has continued to evolve that. So when we talk this afternoon, we'll talk about the next step of that. So that allows us to be as surgical as can be expressed. And you're always in control of what's mitigated where. So we sort of tend to think in terms of a solution comprising perhaps protector type devices, appliances or virtual appliances, as Michael's talking about, supplemented by edge mitigation for the very large attack, supplemented by upstream BGP FlowSpec black holing for the super large attacks, and even getting into cloud. And then you get a defense in depth type story.
Julian, that would suggest that then you're back to the original point. You have the option of looking for something within the packet.
That's
A
correct.
unique identifier.
That's correct.
So you can actually granulate it more than just a port.
And we can supplement the mitigation over time. We don't need a software release necessarily. If we find a new vector or a new fingerprint that we can apply, we have a templating model. So if we can get the right packet sample in to fire, we can actually modify that mitigation between release cycles.
Very often what we're limited by is the router's capabilities, not necessarily what we can do or decide on. That's the options.
Right, and I know here with Michael's presentation, a lot of the Juniper boxes, the PTX and the MX, basically they are allowing mirroring, which allows for faster than flow
Yeah.
specs. S flows or net flows.
Exactly, yeah. NetFlow's great for scalability, not for granularity. That's it.
By the way, just a comment in here, what we're seeing is a typical combination of both the edge as well as the on-prem devices to be able to get to the granularity without sacrificing the speed or the impact to clean traffic, if you want, positive traffic.
And you're going to see this in action, I think, in your session tomorrow, right, Malcolm? Setting it up. And we're going to do some live show of that exact sequence happening at the point.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why we are glad that we were able to extend the contract, that we actually have access to the entire portfolio, because the sort of anything outside of doing it on the MX and the PTX, we've been missing. And we've actually lost customers because they said, yeah, you know, I go to Nextcloud, they just do the lot, yeah. That's not going to happen anymore in the future.
And the opportunity is growing because, you know, with the renewal of the contract and so on, you know, we're lined up to meet some of the engineering team in Juniper to hear about new capabilities coming in ASICs that are not in product yet.
Correct.
And figuring out how we can work together to get even stronger solutions.
Yeah.
So just a pure sales question, what is the probability of being able to get you to relocate to the US the next time you relocate?
Ignore EJ, don't worry, ignore him.
I'm going to be happy to come over, but we actually have a great guy in the US as well, Mark Denny. Have you met him? Yeah. But I'll travel wherever it's necessary to speak about those kind of topics, because this is where my heart beats for. Yeah, it's not about a firewall, advanced threat prevention around DDoS. It's about getting everything together and making it work together, because that's the only way how we are actually going to defend against the bad guys out there, and they're everywhere. Yeah.
And the taxes in Switzerland are a lot better than the US, so fine. Fine.
Carl offered him a reload package, so it's over. That ship sailed, man.
So I'm not going to go into all the different platforms. I mean, the message is very clear. We build our own silicon, and that's basically the hardware that we are using to run the integration with Corero. It's based on the Trio chipset that's used across all the routing platforms, whether it's the smallest MX204, 301 that's coming, the 304 that's edge routers that we use a lot in the enterprise world. We also see them as sort of smaller edge routers in MSP offerings of service providers, up to the big guys, sort of 16 slots of packed 400 gig interfaces on the routers. What I wanted to get into is this guy. That's the latest generation PTX that actually comes as a 32 port 800 gig router. So you had the point before, right? Yep. So you're getting up from 100 to 400. Yep. So that could be your 800 gig at least sampling device for now, yeah. And blocker, yeah, because you just write back the filters and it starts to block the traffic on the 800 gig ports. Now we're just putting that beast into Saudi Aramco. And what's on the plate there is to also do DDoS, because the platform that we're going to route through that beast is their new AI cluster. They're removing all their HPC, putting in AI clusters instead. Now, one of the investment portions of Saudi Aramco is a little company in the US called NVIDIA. That's the reason why they probably get the GPUs faster than the rest of the world. And that makes us, well, very positive that we're actually going to speed up whatever's necessary to get that device supported in SmartWall 1 as well. We do it on TDD today, but we still need to get it into SmartWall 1. I don't think I have to go into that, all the different kinds of DDoS variants that we cover. You know about them. I don't want to keep you from lunch. Just a few examples of where we've successfully been driving the joint Juniper and Corero story. As I said, a lot of our customers are not service providers. They actually come from different kind of enterprises, research networks, the national research networks, like in Japan, CNET 6. It's the latest generation of their research network. They decided to go and extend their existing MX and PTX base. And with that, they said, we're getting so much awful traffic from outside, to use a nice word. We need to do much better. So at the same stage where we positioned Corero there and are rolling out now, or actually have been rolling out for a year, we've also brought in our data center firewalls, because they clearly said it's not just the DDoS thing. We need to look at the layer 7 stuff. We need to do layer 7 deep packet inspection. They're currently rolling out 400 gig connectivity. Basically, we have 2 of our data center firewalls connected with their data center fabric, looking at certain types of VXLANs, doing the segmentation, and sort of saying this could be bad traffic. We'll have a very close look at that. So it's a joint DDoS and firewall game that we've been deploying there. And well, the statement there was they've moved from DDoS not being detected to detecting DDoS within seconds. And these guys are providing the network for all the educational and research institutions in Japan. And then just a few line points. Public service provider in northern Germany, actually in the capital of Germany. They've been using Corero now for a few years. They've been using the MX for the last 20 years. And at a certain stage, we came to the point to say, you are getting these advanced threats, advanced attacks. Don't you want to look into DDoS protection? We are currently evaluating the PTX for their core data center. So they're basically providing all the core IP network and data center services for a major part around Berlin for the public sector. So in Germany, you'll find a lot of customers that say the cloud is evil. Like in the Middle East, they really have big concerns when it comes about cloud sovereignty. They want to have the clouds in country, and they want to have their cloud services in country. These guys basically build cloud infrastructure for all the public institutions around Berlin, and some other areas of Germany. And there we have Corero on the north side, towards their ISP, but also south side. If anything comes through towards their institutions, they're protected. What we know about is in 2024, they had 15 volumetric attacks, and all 15 were blocked. Didn't have an impact, 0 impact. Does that sound like a lot? Well, I don't know. I mean, this is just a number that I got from them a few weeks ago. They said, we know it's 15. And I said, well, if that would have been 15 big outages, I think we wouldn't have been happy, because definitely they would have opened tickets. So it's also good for us. Major university in California, I can't name them. They've been using our MX204 for ages, the 10,000 platform for some time, and now they're putting the 304 as edge routers. And they basically, whenever they buy a router, they buy Corero with that. They just like the solution. It works. It fits for them. Easy to operate. And the one statement that I got back from a recent reference call we did with them was, I don't have to install more hardware. I just use what I have. Operationally, it's a no-brainer. And with that, any questions?
Sorry, I got 2.
Sure.
So you just finished off on, it works on the MX. So where I work, we have the old MX 960s for 15 years. We know that we can't support new MPC cards, but can we support this model?
Yes. It runs on the Trio 3, I think.
Okay,
and it
perfect.
basically supports. Actually, just let me go back. It's somewhere on.
You need to be on the right G. You need to be on the minimum DDoS version.
Yeah. So basically, you need to be here. 17.2 R3.
Yeah, I think some of them don't support 17, so maybe we're
Yeah,
stuck
so then
there. Okay.
you might have the one or the other box that doesn't support it.
Okay, and the next one is your PTX 10002. So the challenge that we've had with the PTX 1000 is it's one built-in card, and sadly the PTX has endured a lot of traffic. It's dying now, right? And it's died a few times at critical points in our network. So my challenge from a DDoS perspective is that 10002 is built in the same model as in it's one MPC. So if the MPC goes down, you're done.
It's fixed.
It's fixed, it's built in, and we're using it on the edge. So if we're pairing with the United States, other Canadian providers, that link is dead. Unless we have a diversity, which we do. But I mean, how did Juniper look at that for that specific box? I know it's not a Juniper situation, but I mean, he pointed out that box.
The point is right. I mean, we took the decision on the 10002. That's going to be our first 800 gig box, because it was the first box that we actually had completely built with the Express 5 chipset, which we needed to actually get to those speeds. We have the line cards based on Express 5 as well now. Yeah, so they basically go into the 10004. There you get 2 routing engines, you get a modular chassis. It's actually going to do your job. Yeah, we're currently just in the process of certifying the optics for those cards. Yeah, but basically I think it's the 36MR. I'd need to look that up. Is based on the same idea of the 3060D. So certify the optics and get that into the 10004 chassis. And that's going to give you the resilience and redundancy that you need.
One quick add, just thinking of your question of the older routers, right? One of the things in our policy model is it tries to apply the best mitigation to the devices it's got available, right?
Right.
So if you want to have a router run FlowSpec and just do a FlowSpec block, just tell us it's a FlowSpec device, right? And you won't get all the closed loop, and you won't get the flexible pattern match, perhaps, of the MX, but you will get mitigation within that capability, right? So you have options to sort of teach the system what your edge is like.
About capacity, still talking about the remote mitigation with the edge. What's the packets per second capacity? Because is it related to the FPCs or the routing engines itself? Because we had some issues in the past. We operate with a lot of 10K routers in our operation in Brazil. We had in the past, so we were talking about that yesterday. Within the entities, the 1100s before. So the previous 100 gigabits LC, I guess 2101, right? 24, 100 gigs. We know that 4 interfaces are always controlled by a single ASIC chip, right? So I had some issues because we were like port 0 at the first entity, port 1, the first entity. So we had that limitation because of the ASIC. So we need to eliminate three ports on each 4-port rule. So we needed a lot of line cards before at the same 10,016. So it's solved now because we changed it to 400 gig and we changed the gears for the 3400. But talking about the remote mitigation, is it a limitation? Is there a limitation for the packet per second? And is it connected to the FPC?
No, so it's basically the FPC or the PIC that matters. Yeah, so you can basically just with the blocks of 4 100 gig ports, there's one you can redirect, right? But there's no limit, yeah, because basically what we're doing is we're sampling the traffic. That works in line rate. That's being done through the ASIC.
So it depends on the deployment and how many line cards and your deployment.
And one of the things that we are seeing is, or one of the reasons why we're seeing customers upgrading from 100 to 400 gig is exactly that. Yeah, I mean the concept of having the PICs. I mean that's going very deep into the concept of the MX and the PTX. Has been there since the very beginning, and there's good reasons for that. Yeah, it's about programmability. It's about making use over-consuming the chipset, the ASIC. And that's not going to go away. So to avoid that, it's sort of going 400 gig. But then you get into the same dilemma. You have a group of 4 times 400 gig, and you can only use 1 or 2.
Or in a higher level. Right?
Yeah. Thank you very much.